The mayor is taking the oath on a Bible once used by President Franklin Roosevelt. It is altogether appropriate that he should do this. Please raise your right hand, state your name, and repeat after me. I, Bill de Blasio,
I, Bill de Blasio,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Charter of the City of New York,
and the Charter of the City of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of Mayor of the City of New York,
the duties of the office of the Mayor of the City of New York,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Good evening. Welcome to another exciting program of the Queen's Grapevine. This is your host, Wallingford Lee. Those of you that follow our program for many years know that we are a community type of program, but we touch on all kind of things. Well, tonight in the program, we want to take the opportunity to talk about the first 8 months of our great mayor, Bill de Blasio. Obviously, Bill de Blasio ran on a lot of promises and new changes. So I know it's a little bit too early, but we want to kind of take a bird's eye view to understand where is that versus the promises that he originally had made. And more importantly, we want to talk about all the new issues that has confronted him and how he has made out. We think that Bill de Blasio happens to be a very decent man and a hardworking man, but there's been some couple of issues that came about that we want to touch. What better person to talk about these issues than but our special guest who has been on our program on various occasions and have done a wonderful job. I'm talking about Mr. Jaime Estates, who happens to be an attorney and also a community leader who has been close to a lot of things that affect the city. So it gives us a great deal of pleasure and, of course, satisfaction to have him one more time on our show to talk about these sensitive issues facing the city and facing our new mayor. Welcome to our program.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's always a pleasure to have you.
Good to see you again.
I want to take a little bit of a snapshot of Bill de Blasio. Where is he for the first 8 months, in your estimation?
I think that he's better than any mayor in recent history. I think that Bloomberg in his first 8 months had not accomplished the things that Bill de Blasio has accomplished, neither Giuliani, neither Dinkins. Those are three previous mayors. For example, he had a big challenge, and I think that we discussed this before. One of the biggest challenges that he had when he came in was the issue of the money that were owed to the unions in New York City. There were around $7 billion that were owed retroactively.
Which Bloomberg left on the side.
He inherited
all that problem.
That huge problem. And also without knowing how the budget was going to look like by June when the budget of the city of New York has to be approved. So he had to juggle all that, and he basically was very successful in negotiating the union contracts and paying the amount that was owed with the municipal unions, the UFT, etc. And those contracts were basically approved. People thought that that was going to take maybe more than a year, that maybe there were going to be payments that were going to be done gradually. There was a lot of speculation on how that was going to be done, and people have different opinions. So people thought that that was never going to happen because the amount was so huge. He was able to do that, I believe, in the first 4 months. That's a major accomplishment. Then there are other issues that we discussed before, such as minimum wage, which he hasn't resolved yet.
But he's working on it.
But he's working on it at the same time that he was working with the monies that were owed to the unions. And he's pushing the governor on that issue very hard. Another big accomplishment was pre-K.
He
was
ran
a-
in that on a pre-K. That was a big
yeah.
thing of part of his campaign. But before we get into pre-K, a lot of cruisers have to go to him knowing that that big cake on the table that Bloomberg left for him, which was dealing with the unions, how difficult that must have been for him. And a great accomplishment to do it in under a year, under 6 months, he got it all resolved.
Well, it's a good strategy for new incumbents to start to put as much legislation that they campaign for at the beginning. Because that way, if something goes wrong, they will have enough time. And this is from a political perspective. They will have time to modify, to make adjustments before the next election in 4 years.
Comes by, okay.
So that's exactly what he did. He started with the unions. Let's resolve this issue immediately. Number one, let's start dealing with pre-K, which was a huge issue, a great victory, even when they had the governor of the state of New York
Against it for a while.
against it. Not only he accomplished that, he forced the governor
To step to the plate.
to step to the plate and to put monies from the state, not from the city, which was not exactly what de Blasio wanted.
But there was some compromise.
But it was a compromise, and he was expecting the compromise. So I think that he negotiated that excellently. I mean, it was great. One after the other. So many people were really surprised how he accomplished two of his major promises immediately. Then the city council also passed, which was one of his ideas, was to pass the legislation allowing the sick leave pay. Something that he has been dragging for a long time.
For years and years.
For years, even when he was a council member. And that was also approved. But with a more progressive and a new city council, it was a lot easier. So those are three major accomplishments. And there is one that is still hanging, which is the one about minimum wage that other cities have been approving throughout the United States. And I think that that is going to happen eventually. The only thing is that we're getting a little bit of impasse and obstruction by the governor, who hasn't been as progressive as Bill de Blasio on this issue. But I think that eventually the city of New York is going to increase the minimum wage in a dramatic fashion.
Why was the governor fighting him so much in the pre-K at the beginning? What was the governor's position? Why he found it? It seemed like he wanted to steal a show for a while also.
Because the governor is the governor. And the governor wants to say, I am the governor, you are the mayor. And you're not going to come here and steal the thunder from me. And, you know, it's basically establishing the tone of a relationship. And to tell you the truth, at least from my perspective, the governor of the state of New York is an old politician. Even when he looks young, you know, he worked with his father for many years. His father
used to be the governor also, right?
Who used to be governor. He used to work for his father as a campaign manager. He knows politics upside down. And he knew that he needed to establish the tone between him and the mayor, who is a friend of his because they used to work together in HUD. So it was basically of saying, let's make sure that you know your place and you know where my place, and my place is above you. So it was mostly political. But also the governor wants to run for president. So he wants to run, and I think it's a big mistake for the governor, to run from a position and with an agenda that is center-right. Personally, I don't see much difference in terms of the fiscal legislations that the governor has been pushing, different from Christie in New Jersey.
Interesting.
In social issues like gay rights, I mean, he did something great also at the beginning of his term. But in terms of minimum wage and other things, he has been, in my opinion, really awful. So there is an impasse there between the two of them on that issue, but I think the city of New York has the capacity to legislate that. And the other issue that I don't want to forget is the issue that doesn't have to do so much in terms of the fiscal aspect, but it's the issue of the horses' carriages in Central Park.
Well, that has been a big thing with the mayor. As a matter of fact, That's something that he took on from day one. He took a position on. The New York Times and the Daily News have critiqued him a lot. In their mind, it seems like he had made promises to certain people who backed him in his campaign to get rid of the carriages. Is that accurate, or is just he had some other stronger feelings against protecting the horses out on the road?
All elected officials owe favors.
Okay.
All of them. Liberals, progressive, conservative, and I don't want to exempt him from this, but the reality is that all elected officials owe favors, and there was a lot of money that came to his campaign through advocates of the animals, animal rights, etc. And just last week, the Working Family Party, which was a party that Bill de Blasio helped to create, went against him on that issue.
Wow. Wow.
And that's the Working Family Party. That's his party. And he has received a lot of obstruction and a lot of negative press on that, because it seems, and I'm not an expert on these issues, but it seems that the regulation that has been created during the last decade in terms of animal rights, especially with the horses carriages in Central Park, have improved dramatically. That's what I have heard. It's not that I'm an expert. And it seems that it's not an issue like it used to be
Before.
maybe 10, 15 years ago.
But the
That there
truth
is
of
a
the
better
matter
treatment.
is that the carriage have always been part of the fiber of New York City. We know that the city of New York makes its money on tourism. And one of the greatest things for tourists to come is to be in Central Park, riding the carriage. So isn't that part of the fiber of New York? Isn't that something important to the Big Apple, you think?
Well, it's part of the history. It's an expectation of tourism. But at the same time, we have to make sure that animals are treated right. And if that is happening, then there is no need to do
abolish
that.
it.
I am in the middle of that issue, but I think that is a legitimate debate.
Okay.
And it's a valid debate, and it should be there. And I think that the mayor hasn't pushed it because he has found some opposition,
resistance, some strong resistance.
and opposition to it. So at least he's doing the right thing of trying to look at at both sides now. The issue in which has been awful, the mayor, and I have no regrets in saying this, is the issue on the police.
And the police
naming
department.
of Bratton as police commissioner. We saw this coming. This guy has been here before, and it was awful what he did when he was mayor of the city of New York. So, but I'm going to let you ask me about that if you want.
Well, I tell you what, when we get back in the second part here of the program, we'll continue talking to Jaime about all these issues. And the previous program that we had, Jaime have taken a very strong position with Bratton being named. I must say that being a police commissioner of a large city like New York City is a very, very, very difficult job. But when we get back on the Queen's Grapevine, we're going to have the opportunity to talk about the pros, the con, and what is it that Bill Bratton brings to the table today, and more importantly, the issue that took place in Staten Island when Mr. Gardner lost his life, and how did Bratton handle it, and how did our mayor handle it, and more importantly, where each and every one of them stand in these sensitive issues. We'll be right back at the Grapevine as we continue percolating forward.
To only use stop and frisk when it's constitutionally warranted and constitutionally applied, and to show communities that we are respecting law-abiding citizens, regardless of color, regardless of age, regardless of gender, that we respect all law-abiding citizens, and our focus will be on the criminals. Bill Bratton's record affirms his belief in this philosophy. A national magazine, once named him, quote, America's top cop. And I say, Bill Bratton, we in New York City are honored to have you as our top cop, and welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. You would bring that magazine cover up.
And we're back here in the Queen's Grapevine talking about the city of New York, one of the largest city, and more importantly, the most important city in the United States of America, the Big Apple. Everyone wants to know it, and how difficult it is to run a city like this. We must pay a lot of kudos to our mayor who have done a wonderful job up to date. But like anything else, we knew there was going to be challenges. Recently, there was a police action against one of the citizens out in Staten Island, where it is our understanding that one of the policemen supposedly put him on a chokehold, and you could hear in the video clearly him screaming, "I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe." And now there's a series of allegations confronting the city, and more importantly, the eyes of everyone is going to be on the police department, Mr. Bratton, who has acknowledged that the police department needs a certain amount of training, because it has been very clear that no police should ever use the chokehold. I repeat, no police must use the chokehold because of things that happen with bias, things that happen with other citizens right here in New York City who have lost their life. And again, as we said when we started the program, there's a lot of big challenges in front of the mayor. He has done very well so far, but this is a big one. When we first met with you last time, you were totally against Bratton being named as police commissioner because you remember some of the things that happened with the Giuliani administration. I never had any good feeling about the Giuliani administration because he always run the city like what he was, a criminal attorney, and he had no respect for minorities, Puerto Ricans, or black. But I would like to think that was Giuliani, so I would like to think that Mr. Bratton come with a new aspect, with a certain amount of planning. How do you see this new thing that took place in Staten Island, and how has he behaved in terms of addressing these issues?
Well, let's go back a little bit. Bratton is a criminologist too, someone who has studied crime. Mm-hmm. He's there because he has credentials in that area. The broken window policy is a policy that is studied in criminology, has been done in criminology research, in universities, etc. So this is not something that he created, but it's something that he adopted.
And he implemented it here.
And he implemented it here under Giuliani. Mm-hmm. So this is not new to New York.
Agree.
And the policy is this. Basically, you go to places and you look for people and you profile people that you think that may be in a position of committing a crime, or they are doing something that is minimal, like spitting on the sidewalk, and then you approach them.
Right.
People who are cleaning, which was very typical during Giuliani during that time. Windshields, etc.
Urinating in the streets.
Exactly. But the thing is that it gives you an opportunity in order to see if they have a criminal record. Maybe the police is always looking for people
on purpose.
Mm-hmm. So you find them that way. That's the purpose of going after these small crimes. To see who is it that escaped, who is it that we haven't captured, who has a record, so we can take them back.
And you just bounce on them.
And you bounce. And then you go to specific areas where you know that you're going to find this type of what they think that's where they're going to find this type of behavior. Now, if you go to Wall Street, cocaine is all over the place.
Yes.
There are dealers there all over the place. Mm-hmm. You never see
big white crime.
Big white collar crime. You never see the police making arrests there. But if you want to go after crime, that's a good place to start with, because it's all over, and everybody in the city of New York knows that is happening. But they don't do that. They go where there are poor people, where there are people who are vulnerable. We have been under these, especially minorities, under this cloud of the illegal marijuana, that just by having a joint destroy the record of anyone, and then you have a criminal record. And then what you find is that type of things. So by definition, people are being profiled because that's the type of crime that you're looking for.
And for a purpose.
And for a purpose. So he has always used that type of policy. He did it in New York, he did it in Boston, and he did it in LA. The thing is that when he was under Giuliani, it gives an opportunity for cops to enter into physical action with individuals. And when that happens, when you start touching people, when you start arresting people for petty offenses, there is always some physicality. What happened in Staten Island, it was someone who broke up a fight. It was a citizen who tried to do the right thing. He stopped a fight from happening, and then the police comes, and then they start questioning him and being hostile toward him. Until he said, look, no one, whether you are a citizen or a policeman, no one wants to be harassed. And you always say something. Not everybody's a lawyer on the street. Not everybody says, you know, you can question me, you can arrest me. People say, wait, what is happening here? And that's the guy protested. Because that policy allowed the police to question him, to go after him, someone who was doing nothing. So the policy prepares the ground for these types of action. Under Bratton, more than 16 Latinos in 8 years died. Not to mention the numbers of African Americans, because he prepared the ground for that. So people say, well, what happened is that under Bratton, crime came down.
Mm-hmm. That he brought crime down.
Yeah, well, that's not true. David Dinkins, Mayor Dinkins, basically created something called Safe Street, Safe Cities.
I remember it.
2 years before. And he put millions of dollars into community policing. Mm-hmm. The crime began to slow down and to go down under the last few years, the last year and a half of Dinkins. But not only in New York City. It also happens throughout the United States that the crime started coming down. So when Giuliani comes, when Bratton comes, the crime is already going down, and Bratton started taking credit for those numbers, for those statistics. So it's important to put it in a historical context, because Bratton gets a lot of credit for things that he not necessarily accomplished. So it has been one of the things that I remember from that era is that he changed the police uniform, and he made it darker to go with that policy. And it was like a uniform, and he said it many times, darker uniforms create a perception of more authority on the street.
Then maybe in a situation like that, we should put cameras on the police when they're making arrests.
Yeah,
maybe we should do that.
Yeah, but just the uniform itself, it looks like a fascist uniform. You know, the fascists in Europe, they wear black because they have the same mentality. The same mentality was that if you were dark, you are going to produce, you're going to project a sense of authority in the street. And you have not one person, but a group of people, an arm. He adopted that. It was calculated. It's not that one day he said, you know, they may look good in black. There is a sense,
so he had a
perception. And he came with all that mentality. So what is happening now, this is just the beginning. In 8 months, you already have this. Daily News just came with a report that says that 90% of the people who are being now arrested and stopped are basically black and Latino, 90%. This is worse than stop and freeze to me.
Well, it's interesting that you said that, and I want to get in a couple of things. I think that Bill Bratton, has a very difficult job. I said that to you at the beginning of the last program we did. And I know this thing that happened in Staten Island is going to bring a lot of ink and a lot of attention to him, because the police department keeps saying that Mr. Gardner was resisting arrest, even though he had his arms up. There's 6 or 7 of them, but that's the way they reacted. Let's go to something real fast, because we've got about 3 minutes. What was your impression at a roundtable conference that we had when basically Reverend Al Sharpton kind of got a little loud and a little tough with the mayor? What was your opinion in terms of that? You think that was necessary? Was he disrespectful? Or was he just caught up into a situation?
Let's take them separately. Bill and de Blasio and Sharpton, they know each other. Okay. It's not like they have never dealt before with each other. We know who Sharpton is, and Sharpton has earned the right to say what he has to say in terms of crime in New York City. He has earned it. On the other side, then you have the mayor of the city of New York, who knows how Sharpton is, charismatic, and there is no way that Sharpton is going to go to any press conference and not steal the show. Bill knew that, and if and I'm going to take devil's advocate. If I were advising the mayor, I would have said, you know what Sharpton is going to do. He's going to steal the show, and he's going to come after you. If I were an advisor to the mayor, I would say, don't sit him next to you. Bill tried to do the right thing. Sharpton, give him the credit that Sharpton deserved, put him there. And personally, as a father talking, I think that Sharpton, on one thing, crossed the line, was when he talked about his son. I think that on that, personally, I don't agree. However, in terms of the criticism of what happened with that incident, Sharpton was right. I agree with that. But I think that when you talk about the personal life and the children of other people,
it's a no-no.
Is, for me, other people may disagree with me on that, but I think that on that, he crossed the line.
I think a lot of people in New York City don't like Sharpton, but I think he served a purpose. I think he's a community leader, and he takes on a lot of things that people are afraid to get involved with. And just like you said, he and Bill de Blasio knows one another very well. I think they need to have some type of common ground to work together as a team, because there are going to be other issues that comes up during the years and while he's in office, and they need to communicate a little bit better. In your estimation, where do you think the Staten Island situation is going? We have approximately maybe a minute, give or take.
Well, basically, the city of New York, the coroner of the city of New York, already said that it was murder, according to the results. And it looks in the tape. You see, when you have a tape, you don't have too many witnesses. You don't have to do too much research.
It's there.
Everything is there. And that was completely unnecessary. 11 times he said that
I can't breathe.
I can breathe. And they continue. And it's you shouldn't use that, especially when you have around 7 or 8 other policemen around. Also, he did it from the back when the guy was not attacking anyone. He came from behind, and with the whole purpose of create a physical confrontation. That should have been dealt completely different. Look what happened in Kansas City now. Last night, a new police officer came and had a different approach, working with the community, and nothing happened.
Thank goodness. Well, I mean, again, half an hour is too much of a short period. We don't have words to thank you for your input and all these things that's going on in the city. And we want to thank you so much for being my special guest.
I'm always happy to be here with you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Again, this is Wallingford Lee saying goodnight. But before I say goodnight, I just want to say that running the city of New York, a large city like this, is not an easy thing. And we got to give a lot of kudos to our mayor, which I think is doing a pretty good job. There are going to be difficult moments like the ones that he's living through right now with the death of Mr. Gardner. Nobody wants to lose a family member, and I'm sure his family is going through a very difficult period of time. Also, the police department has a very, very difficult job to do out in the street, and sometimes they're somewhat distrustful. But it goes without saying that a great deal of cops in the police department in New York are not properly trained. They don't know how to deal with certain people or certain minorities, and these type of things create a certain amount of problems. And again, this is Wallingford Lee saying goodnight for the Queen's Grapevine, and we hope that you've enjoyed the show that has been extremely informative of some of the issues that are taking place right here in the Big Apple. Good night.